Welcome everyone. We are now entering week 7 of our 10-week quarter. So you have just finished the first third, which was about invisibility and hypervisibility in data. The second third, which was about how do we explain the data with a very narrow focus on the household. Now, for the rest of this quarter, we are going to think through what we learned from our bargaining models, but push that forward. In other words, we're going to have to think through. In the bargaining model, we learned that the things that can constrain us are sometimes interior to the family. How does your family treat you? Do you have a progressive spouse? Do you have children? But very often, the things that constrain you inside the family come from outside. They come from, is there an inequality in wages in the labor market? Are the issues you face when it comes to supporting your family and bargaining due to the law or due to your spouse? So our starting point for the rest of this quarter is to realize that what happens inside the household is shaped by what happens outside the household. So even though in much public and political discourse, we are focused on how what you do inside the household shapes your work outside the household. So you must be the person, your household must be the person, you are the people who aren't doing stuff in the labor market. We are now reversing that causality. Item 1. Item 2. Most bargaining models do represent and replicate the classic heteronorm. And we're going to talk about what it means to open that up a little bit. But the classic heteronorm is a heterosexual family with a wife and a husband, maybe children, figuring out gender roles. Husband work, wife stay at home, other way around, whatever. The difficulty here is twofold. So let's work through both of those. The first difficulty is that the household that's being imagined is a heterosexual household. And assuming, as Gary Becker did, all the laws, all the divorce, all the ways of dating, all of that aligned by law and culture and everything else for that family, husband, wife, children. So first, the question we have to ask is, what happens if we expand this model beyond the heteronorm? Now, this might easily look to you as, oh yeah, we're going to include LGBTQ. And yes, we are. But that's not all it is. Think of all the ways in which families exceed the heteronorm. Heteronorm is a nuclear family, a husband, a wife, and kids. What about the joint family? How many of you live in multi-generational families? You got your grandma, you got your grandpa, you're in multi-generational kinship, you live with your cousins half the time in terms of childcare. It's your auntie that's doing this. Sometimes sibling order matters. Instead of your mom, is it your sister who's doing it? Does it matter if you are the oldest sister and you are supposed to take care of your siblings while your mom is going out to work and then your brother goes to college? Huh? Interesting. So what about the joint family? What about kinship in general? Many of us, most of the world, does not live in a nuclear heterosexual family. We live with aunties, we live with uncles, we live with grandparents. Many of us also live in blended families. We live in blended families where, for example, my dad got divorced, got remarried, my new mom brought her kids. The two of them had kids. I also have siblings from my mom who is now married to another guy. Many of us live in blended families, right? We don't live in these narrow heterosexual families. So now we have to ask ourselves, does feminist economics address this? So first is just family structure, LGBTQ, kinship, single moms, multi-generational families, blended families, all of that was missing. Now I'm going to add one more thing. Family structure is one item. And the second one is, once my family structure changes, who am I bargaining with? The original bargaining model was a husband and wife bargaining about who takes care of the child, right? The child itself, the kid themselves, was simply the object of bargaining. They never bargained. Nobody was bargaining with the state. Nobody was bargaining with the community. Everything was the heteronorm. So once we open up beyond the heteronorm, we've got family structure and whom we're bargaining with. And I'm going to go through both of these one by one. So the first thing I want to address is family structure. How does bargaining change when gay marriage, LGBTQ marriage, is legal? Now you have the right to be present in the lives of your children. But say if you get divorced, you also then have bargaining to go through. Do we have evidence that LGBTQ families are superior to heterosex families? Or do we see the same patterns of who has the higher wage, who has the lower wage, shaping what's happening in the homosex family? That's item one. Item two, just inside the family, who bargains with whom? So far, we've always presented it as adult husband and adult wife. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples where I think bargaining is both useful, but also needs to be opened up. So the example I'm going to give you is of someone who I wish she publishes her paper. She never did. So Shiba, I hope you do that. But that said, she did a study of bargaining in LGBTQ families in India. Here's the thing. You always think bargaining is with your spouse. And then once you get your support in bargaining in your family, then you can face the world, right? LGBTQ. If my family is behind me, then I can face the world. A very interesting question. What she pointed out is most of the people she interviewed were actually out to the community. They were actually politically active in the community. You know who didn't know they were LGBTQ? It was their parents. So how do you think of this, where the bargaining is not your family will support you and make you brave and change you and help you finally address the world? This is the model, right? We parents have to really give pride to our children, our daughters, our sons, and they're all going to be like great. They know we're behind us, then they're going to bargain with the world. Here's the situation. They're bargaining with the world. What they're frightened of is bargaining with family, right? Do you see that? So I'm going to give you an example that I heard from this case study. This is a woman, fairly well known. Her parents didn't know she was out and LGBTQ. The community did. The political world did. But they lived in a small town. I heard that and so on. So she finally said, okay, I guess I need to come out to them. Bargaining. And here is what she faced. Her progressive, educated dad. He was like, are you kidding me? I supported you. I fought this family to put you through college, not make you get married early on. I was like, my daughter is going to be the next woman in the Supreme Court in India. I fought for you. All for what? So you can spend your time doing cases on who can sleep with who? Sorry, this is embarrassing. Her mom, 8th grade educated, highly conservative. Mom cried. She's like, oh, you're not going to get married, blah, blah, blah. Then she's like, okay, instead of having a son-in-law, I will now get a daughter-in-law. 2 girls. I will choose your wife. I'm going to arrange your lesbian marriage. You're not going to bring any of these meat-eating Christians, Muslims, and foreigners into my house. No, no, no. I will get you a good Indian girl. I will find her for you. You will get married and you will live a good Indian life as a lesbian couple. How do you bargain on both these sides? One side is seemingly progressive, but it actually denigrates LGBTQ lives. The other side is seemingly accepting, but it actually controls LGBT lives, right? So this is a moment when you look at a different element of bargaining, not husband to wife, but child to parent. We don't have enough bargaining models explaining how the biggest bargaining very often is not husband to wife, date to date. It's kid to parent. That's how we bargain, right? We bargain with our parents. And so the Diane Wolf article I want you to read, Daughters, Decisions, and Dominance. That's an article that takes us from the bargaining models beyond the heteronorm into the labor market. because it does a comparative case study in Asia. Because we all know, right? We all know that Asian development entailed export zones, Nike, garment, shoe, electronics, and all that labor was done by young, unmarried women. We've heard this. That's who did that work. Girls from age 16 to 22 to 24. That's who did that work. This was the center of one of the major global economic transformations in the world. And the bargain there was never with a husband. The bargain there with parent. So here you are, young Asian women going to work in a culture supposedly about keeping women at home, conservative, never letting them work. Yet the world's biggest labor transformation in the 80s, 90s, young women across Asia showing up in export zones to do labor. And who are they bargaining with? They're not bargaining with husbands. They're bargaining with parents. In some cases, they fight the parents to go work. In other cases, they don't want to work. Their parents force them to work. So how do you understand bargaining, which is intergenerational, not merely heterosexual? Right? So there are two elements to kinship. One is beyond the heteronorm, and I want you to look at the data from the Williams Institute, and I want you to look at the video by Lee Badgett, Feminist Economics 101, on what LGBTQ feminism looks like in economics. But the second thing I want you to remember is this question is not just for LGBTQ people. It's for all of us. Every single one of us has to worry about who we are bargaining with. Sometimes you bargain with your spouse. Sometimes you bargain with your parents. And sometimes you bargain with the state. You fight for new laws, for new opportunities, and that could be anything from LGBTQ marriage to unionization and labor rights and retirement for women who work in the zones. Any one of this is a bargaining, as Bina Agarwal puts it, not just within, beyond the household. So our transition this week is that we're going to take the bargaining model and we're going to use it to realize that bargaining as a frame is a useful way to think about who bargains, with whom, when, how, and why. And it's not always husband and wife. It's anything from kids bargaining with their parents to communities bargaining with the state.